Hey, everybody, I'd like to welcome you to the Third Legacy Tradition Study. This month we are going to be studying Tradition 5. And we have three great presenters to talk about Tradition 5 here with us tonight. But I'm going to turn it over to Stephen, our MC for the evening.
Thank you, Lara. I'm Steve Alcoholic.
Hey, Steve.
And again, thanks Mike from Kingston, Mikey and Sally for being here. And what we found with these tradition studies is hopefully we can go away with a new and better understanding of why we even have them. And Tradition 5, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And maybe tonight, through our presenters, we'll find out a few things like even what is our primary purpose, and what's the message that we want to carry, and what does a still suffering alcoholic even look like. So there can be a lot of twists and turns in looking at these traditions, and I'm excited to hear from them. And I guess we haven't talked about this yet, but why don't we get an order of presentation, and maybe we can start with Mikey and then go to Sally, whose nickname is the Goddess, I found out, and then Mike from Bremerton or Silverdale. And if that's okay, we'll have a 10-minute timer, and we're not critical. If it beeps and you're not finished, just finish up. We're not rigid in that sense. So we'll get right going. And thank you, Mikey, for.
Thank you. I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm honored to be here because I'm still learning, and I'm glad that I'm a teachable alcoholic because I learn something every time I come here. So, fifth tradition: each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. We were talking before the meeting about how preferential we like the actual Tradition 5, the long form, because it gives me more of an idea of each Alcoholics Anonymous group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose. And I like the idea of a spiritual entity because of the fact that I believe that it brings in the unity of the program and the we problem with the part of the program there. So it says having one primary purpose, that of carrying its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And in preparing for this, I love reading the tradition checklist, which we'll probably go through after we read everything, to make sure that Steve is making sure that we are excuse me, I should turn this volume off. I didn't know that. So I'm going to read out of the Illustrated, the 12 Traditions Illustrated, and this is, and then I believe Sally is going to read the out of the fifth tradition, or maybe even the other Mike. So it says that every newcomer learns, and some of us the hard way, that the business of staying sober must have top priority. And if we fail at that, we can't succeed at anything else. And the fifth tradition tells us that groups should remember their own primary purpose. And often, unthinking enthusiasm puts a group off the main track. One, for instance, offered an expanded AA program that included helping newcomers to find jobs. Tradition 5 doesn't frown on the individual AA who tells another about a good opening, but when the group turns itself into an employment agency, newcomers may get confused about their primary purpose. AA's function is to help them to get sober. Then they can find work for themselves. And using discretion, a member may lend a few dollars needed for a meal or a hotel room, or maybe even invite a broke alcoholic to be a temporary house guest. But the AA group as a whole is not friendly finance company, nor a welfare department, nor a housing bureau. So even when acting on their own as individual members, AA by the people certainly shouldn't award themselves honorary medical degrees and hand out diagnoses and prescriptions and amateur analysis of other people's neuroses. Exactly because this personal failing is so common, the AA group in all its dealings should be extra careful to empathize that it's not invading the medical field through the personal experiences of all its or of its member, it is qualified to carry only one message and how an alcoholic can recover in AA, and that's all. And yet, one group recently felt self-equipped to set up an alcoholism information center, and the temptation is understandable. It was even stronger at the time this tradition was written because public ignorance, about alcoholism as an illness was more widespread than it is now. And since then, other agencies have sprung up to assume that that task of educating the general public in alcohol and the general public on alcoholism. And that's not AA's purpose. But these agencies also are trying to help the active alcoholic. They are our friends. And Tradition 6 marks the boundaries of the relationship. So, um, my take on this is that as an individual, I need to, if I need to take care of somebody or if I want to help somebody, it's got to be out of the confines of the AA group. If it seems like I go to a lot of meetings, especially when I came to meetings, there were people always bumming cigarettes. There were always, there was always donuts there, and there was coffee that was always provided. But when I was first going, there was a McDonald's next door, and it seemed like there's a lot of people walking in hungry, asking, and I would give food to them, which I felt was kind of service work. But what I'm getting out of this is the group has to separate itself from that and let the individual do his thing, but not, we can't do it as a group, as a whole. We can be there to provide the place, the hot water for the coffee, the electricity to, a lot of them use the electrical boxes to charge the phones up. And I think my belief on this is that uh, or my personal sole purpose in the AA program is to be there and offer words of encouragement that we learn through the big book and keeping it part of the big book, the first 164 pages, because when things get a little bit too out of hand, you have too much information, it starts to confuse the newcomer. We always kid about the other books that are out there that people use, and they refer to them, as non-AA approved literature. And I believe now, having my years of experience, that we need to just stick to what we know what we're good for, and not try to be some people that we are not. And I'm referring to the point is I'm not a doctor. I thought I was playing a doctor earlier on with all the the drugs and all that, but it was something that I had to learn to let go and uh, offer the part that maybe you should go see somebody. And so that's pretty much my take. That's only been, oh, good. I'm reading it backwards. I got 3 minutes. I thought it was, oh my God, I only talked 3 minutes. I know it. But I do, on the same page, I really uh, like this saying is the responsibility clause that it says I am responsible when anyone anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA always to be there, and for that I'm responsible. And when I read that, that brings me in a whole different light of, yeah, I want to be there. I want to be there for the still suffering alcoholic, and I also want to be spiritual. I want to be firm in and directing them in the right information. When I'm answering phones down here, I want to make sure that the information that we have on in our that when they go to a meeting, that door is going to be open, or refer them somewhere else, or if they're having troubles trying um, to just finding a meeting is the toughest part. Try not to get too much into their history of how to stay sober, but there's so many other things, as it said in the third paragraph, and I'm just going to kind of finish with this, is um, I can use what I've learned in AA in different avenues. I can go to, um, let's say, Union Gospel Mission. I can and talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, my experience, strength, and hope. I can go to the Key Recovery, or I can go to Milam, or I can go to Harborview, and I get to go those places and talk about my experiences and tell them there is hope and that we can get there. So thank you for allowing me to do 9 minutes of happiness and joy and free. And I'm going to pass it on to either my left, that would be Mike, or Sally. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And now we get to hear from the goddess Sally.
Sally Alcoholic.
Hi, Sally.
Hi, thanks
Sally.
for having me. I love doing this stuff, and I love talking about the fifth tradition. It's like I like all of them. The traditions are like so important to keep our meetings together, but this one here I find is one of the 12 that gets broken a lot, I see in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so my job is to kind of, like it says in this thing, to firmly explain to newcomers. And I hear I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah.
So I just want to read the first paragraph in the 12 and 12. It begins with tradition 5. Each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Shoemaker, stick to thy last. Better do one thing supremely well than many badly. This is the central theme of this tradition. Round it, our society gathers in unity. The very life of our fellowship requires the preservation of this principle. So just that one statement right there, the very life of our fellowship. And I think it was like the president of GSO years ago said that the downfall of Alcoholics Anonymous would come from within. And as a person with long-term sobriety, I see that happen a lot, where people come into Alcoholics Anonymous and they want to be an alcoholic addict. That's inappropriate. There's a whole other 12-step program for addicts. And you wouldn't go to a Overeaters Anonymous meeting and go in there and talk about your alcoholism. And the reason for that is because they too have a singleness of purpose. So then you've got to ask yourself, what is the primary purpose? Each group has but one primary purpose. And the primary purpose is to carry the message of alcoholism, not drugs, not gambling, not overeating, not over shopping. It's alcoholism and recovery from it. and so that's our message. And then it talks about the alcoholic who still suffers. So then you got to go, well, who is that? Is that the guy, crawling from underneath the bridge and coming into our meeting? Perhaps. Is it somebody with, a couple of days of sobriety that's just beginning their journey in sobriety? Perhaps. But it could also be somebody with long-term sobriety, the suffering alcoholic. Those words can affect a lot of different people in our program. It's not just the newcomer. And so I find it crucial to our program that we stick to the singleness of purpose. It talks primary. So I have primary down here, says main, placed before all others. That's primary. So what the book is telling us is that it's really important that we stick to our singleness of purpose, one purpose. And so shoemakers stick to my last. Well, I had to look up a last. I didn't know what a last was. So last is that little wood shoe thing that they make shoes with, right? So the shoemaker's not going to go to the cigar factory and try to make cigars, because he's going to stick to his last. And he also has one purpose. Then if you go on the next page, it says here, our society has concluded that it has but only one high mission: to carry the AA message to those who don't know there's a way out. And so I'm reminded of a little lady. Her name was Mert, and Mert has passed away now. And she got sober when she was like 60 or 65. And I think she had 12 years when she passed away. But I was sitting in a meeting with her one time, and these guys were all talking about their drug use. And she came up to me after the meeting and asked me why they were talking about playing pool, because they kept talking about 8 balls. So, and so, we kind of laugh about that, those of us that know what an 8 ball is. But, for her, she didn't have a clue. And this little woman had drank her whole life. And all she wanted to do was to stay sober within Alcoholics Anonymous. And she can't hear that message if people are in the meetings talking about their drug use. So as a sponsor, you love me or you hate me, but as a sponsor, one of the first things I tell these girls is you are no longer an alcoholic addict, because it's inappropriate in our meetings. So when you're in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, you are just an alcoholic. And I think that is really important. My story personally, I'm a chemist project. I'm a pig when it comes to that stuff. And I didn't care what it was. My drug of choice was more of anything. And, but I don't talk about that in AA, because I have such a mad respect for these traditions, and particularly this one. So, I could go on and on and on about this stuff, but, it just talks in here about being firm in your belief. And, that is how I try to, work my program, is to maintain that firmness in my own belief, and to stay steady in that, and to pass that on to the new people that often don't like what I have to say, but I would rather say it to their face and have them never speak to me again than stand over their grave and say, gee, I wish I would have said that. So like I said, I could go on and on, but actually, that's all I have to say. I think that I've said enough and I've made my point. And again, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Sally.
Thank you, Sally. And Mike, you're up.
Hello, I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic. Tradition 5, we have a tradition study too in our hall, and we go over these traditions, and sometimes it goes in one ear and out the other. But tradition 5 is one of the ones, I think all of the traditions, I always have to remember are traditions for the group, not the person. And they're mistakes from what happened in the past. All these traditions are there because they messed up, man. And now it's a tradition so that we in the future don't have to stumble like they did in the past. I knew what a last was because my first job was I was working in the shoe factory. So that was like, oh hell, man, this is something really neat. But when I first saw it, I thought they were at first when they said shoemakers stick to their last. It's been, that was my first job. I'm 67 years old, so that was like 50 freaking years ago. So it kind of, I thought when they said stick to thy last, meaning the last thing that you did, but then it dawned on me, oh yeah, alas, that's that form that you use to make a shoe. And then I understood it. You do what you're supposed to do. If you're a shoemaker, if you're whatever, do what you're good at. And with AA, of course, we want to be good at a lot of things. And I personally think that this also intertwines with the Washingtonians of what they had a good thing going way back when, but they got involved in many, many, many other things. And they are no longer out there, the Washingtonians, unless, of course, they're a different group name or something. But they had to find out from their mistake that it's best to do something good that you know of that is working. I noticed, Sally, you said a couple of things that I kind of even wanted to say, but in that page under, I have a lot of stuff opened of as far as the traditions. Oh my gosh, there's things in the big book, the 12 and 12. You've read this whole thing on the 12 traditions pamphlet. And I looked into the language of the heart. There's good stuff in all of these things about the traditions. And one thing where it says to carry the AA message to those who don't know there's a way out. For me, this is the group. So it talks in this story about Bill going to the doctor saying, hey, you got anybody? Because I need to work on my sobriety and I need another drunk. So he goes and finds this Irishman, and the Irishman then talks about certain things about, it's about money and it's about religion. And really, what I see too is what it's not, what we are not. And I always like going to the forward to the first edition and talking about we are not an organization in the conventional way. The sense of the word, I'm sorry. There is no dues or fees whatsoever. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. We're not allied with any particular faith, sect, or denomination, nor do we oppose anyone. We simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted. And then with the group, I think it has to do with cooperation with the professional people, public information, accessibilities, treatment. Where are these alcoholics that don't know there's a way out? If we as a group have those particular chair people there to go out and find them, let them know that there's an AA meeting at the Silverdale Hall in Bremerton, then possibly they'll come to one. And then as a group, we can let them know what alcoholism is and that we have a way out. Not that we're going to give them a room to live or, well, we give them coffee, but that's a good benefit, for coming into an AA hall. But it's so that we can let them know that the book is telling us that there's a way out. And we as alcoholics talking one drunk to another, that this is what I did to stay sober. It's not what I did to get a job. It was the after effect of staying sober to get that job. It's the after effect. Once I stayed sober, my family finally came back to me. It's all of those things. I'm not going to help you to give you money unless certain times. That's, of course, up to the individual, not the group. So that's where this is a group thing, not a personal thing, because we as a person can do what we want. We can tell them about our drug use. We can tell them about our overeating ice cream issues that I have at night. And maybe that might be something where we've got something in common then too, to form a relationship to possibly be a sponsor, sponsee kind of a thing. But as far as a group, we talk about alcoholism and how to stay sober. And by doing the 12 steps, that's one way of doing it. And tradition 5, our primary purpose is just that, its message. I even highlighted its message. What is its message? Our message is to stay sober in accordance with what we have to do with the steps by doing the steps. And I think it is a spiritual thing, because if I don't give it away once I have it, that's my spiritual thing. I gotta help another individual. And it goes from a group thing to an individual thing, because we're there, the group is there. We have a door opened up for them to come in, but each individual then is there to share our story, as long as they realize that there are differences, but listen for the similarities. And with that, you know, that's where I guess that's what I had to do anyway. I had to look for the different or the similarities of what they're talking about, in order to find out if I was an alcoholic or not too. Let's see. Another thing on the last, just about the last page in the 12 and 12, the thing where the guy was in bed, he was saying this really rocked him. But as he calmed down, he began to listen while I tried to show him that humility was the main key to sobriety. I mean, there's so many things in these books that kind of like hit each individual person. And if we stick to alcoholism and how it helped us, it's going to help them too. Because a lot, just like me, I didn't know I was an alcoholic until I came in here and heard what the stories were all about as a group of people. So that, I guess that's about all I got myself too. So I hope that was all right.
Oh, great job, Mike. Thank you. And I can't read who else is on the screen.
Bernice.
Denise.
Bernice, welcome to our meeting. And if you had anything you wanted to share or comment on, we're real big on crosstalk at this meeting.
Well, I will try not to do that. My name is Bernice. I am an alcoholic, and I'm a real one.
And welcome, Bernice.
Thank you so much. I've really been enjoying these tradition studies. I've been coming for the last few months, and I will continue to come as God gives me breath to be able to do so that I can keep on learning about this disease of alcoholism and how to stay sober despite the fact that I'm an alcoholic. And so far, I really liked what I heard, because, you know, everybody who spoke had something that I could relate to. And that's probably because we're all alcoholics. And I'm an alcoholic. And so I related. You know, I related to what Mike said about the responsibility statement. I take that very personally, because I have a life today because of the fact that other people take it personally. They take it so personally that they take time out of their day to make sure that another alcoholic can have another day without drinking, even if they're going through life on life's terms. And we go through life on life's terms as long as we're alive. And the thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is that we get to be alive. And while we get to be alive, we don't have to drink, even if we're alcoholic. That's what AA is all about. That's its primary purpose, is to let other people who suffer from the disease of alcoholism know that they don't have to drink even if they want to. And we are alcoholics. It's in our nature to want to, but we don't have to, as long as we stick together in unity with that one purpose. The one primary purpose is to stay sober and to help others recover from alcoholism. So, Sally, what you were saying about singleness of purpose, absolutely. You know, you said you can love us, or you can love me, or you can hate me, but I would rather speak to you to your face than to speak to you over your grave. I second that emotion. And that's all I got to say about that. As far as Mike is concerned, Mike, thank you so much. Everything that you said, I was just shaking my head, shaking my head. Yep, 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 yep. You know, especially about the literature. I am an AA literature hound. I love the archives. I love going into the older stuff. And I love when other people who share, go into the other stuff and give me other stuff for me to look up. And so when you were talking about, you know, the shoemaker stick to thy last, actually my first sponsor had told me what that was. And when I first heard it from him, I was like, what? What does that mean? He said, no, it's a thing that a shoemaker puts their shoes on in order to make the form of the shoe that the person's going to wear. And I was like, what does that have to do with alcoholism? He said, well, a shoemaker uses that to make his money. A shoemaker uses that to make his living. You want to live, right? I said, yeah. He said, you don't want to drink, right? I said, no. He said, you don't want to drink. Why? I said, because I want to live. He said, well, you're an alcoholic. And as an alcoholic, you should stick to your last, which is staying away from a drink. And so that's what I do today, you know, but I don't do it alone. I do it with your help. And, you know, Zoom is an amazing thing. We have only one ultimate authority in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is a loving God who is our ultimate authority and sees fit to bring us together by whatever means is necessary for us to realize that we're not alone. And for that, I am truly, truly grateful. So thanks.
Thanks so much for sharing, Bernice. And maybe I even have a few words to say. So, Steve, alcoholic. And thank you, Mikey. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Sally. I got something out of everybody's talk. And Mikey, you mentioned the word spiritual entity when you talked. And you did, I wrote it down. Okay.
Yay.
So that brought back a memory that I even think I can tie it into the fifth tradition. I ran into that phrase once with my sponsor, and so it must have been a fifth tradition meeting, and we talked about the spiritual entity, and he said, Steve, would you do me a favor? And I said, well, you know, sure. And he said, will you write the difference between a spiritual entity, a sane entity, and a sober entity? And I said, what? And he said, yeah, just what's the difference? And I sensed a trick question because I'm pretty smart. And I said, even what are you talking about? And he said, what if they're all the same? What if a spiritual way of life is no different than a sane way of living and a sober, a correct thinking way of living? And I had never heard that perspective before, and it was really helpful to me because I've never woken up in the morning ever and thought, I just want to be spiritual today. You know, maybe I'll go try and walk on water. I've never had that thought. But I've often had the thought that I just want to have a sane day. I just want to be sane. I want to be sober. And when I was introduced to that idea that what if they are all the same, it was really helpful to me. Okay, so then back to some other stuff. I came to my first AA meeting August 14th, 1986, and I came in a Mercedes. No big deal. I owned a car lot, so I had a lot of different cars. And I came drunk, of course. 3 years later, so that would be August of 89, I had gone to a meeting, at least one meeting a day in those 3 years. That's over 1,000 meetings. And I was driving a 1972 Pinto with the passenger window was plastic. The tabs were expired and the tires were bald. And I hadn't had a drink. And the message I got, and I'm not saying that this was the one offered to me, the message I got was, don't drink and everything else will be okay. And now remember, that's the message I heard, but that doesn't mean that's what was trying to be presented to me. I thought that not drinking was everything. Later I found out that according to our literature, not drinking is a beginning. Nowhere have I seen where it's unimportant, but it does say in plain English that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. So what happened after 3 years is I met a man who had recovered from alcoholism, and I ended up talking with him, and I was trying to brag because it was my 3-year birthday about, hey, I haven't had a drink in 3 years. I go to a meeting every day. I've been coffee maker. Maybe I was a secretary. I don't remember. And all that. And he said, but you're crazy, Steve. You're crazy. And tears started coming out of my eyes because I thought, who is this guy that would say such a terrible thing to me? But his voice went to my heart instead of my head. And I thought, this guy knows. And he said, did you know you can get well in AA? And my immediate answer was, nobody recovers from alcoholism. That's the deal. And he said, do you have a big book? And I said, yeah, I do, it's pristine condition. And so we opened it up to the title page, and in the biggest font in the book, it says what Alcoholics Anonymous is. It's a story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And I said, quick to correct him, I said, but nobody ever recovers, really. And he said, what if you're wrong? He said, what if they're not lying to us? What if their story is they did recover? What if they found out their main problem wasn't drinking, but it was how they thought? And I'd never heard that stuff before. And so I started going to his group. And his group, and I'm just in, I mean, not that it matters, but I'm in total agreement with everything you said, Sally. And even back then, there was a lot of ands, alcoholic and drug addict. I think there's way more now, just way, way more. And as alcoholic, I didn't need drugs because booze did the work. Booze did the job. But this primary purpose, which this man understood, from that, I got to see when I'm working with someone, I want to be effective. So I don't want to stand at the grave. And I don't want to chase someone away because there's a better way to present information than maybe I've had. And so what I've done with some success is I get the new guy and he's an alcoholic and an addict. And I ask him one of the first times we meet, tell me about the drugs. And so I hear a story about drugs. And then I agree with them because it sure sounds like you're a drug addict. Tell me about the booze. And so then he tells me about the booze. And I said, well, here's where I feel I can be helpful. I totally agree with your self-assessment that you're a drug addict. Let's just look at the alcoholism. And when we're all through with that, we'll see if there's anything we can do with the drug addiction. And I often get the, hey, they're the same thing. And I say, maybe they're not. It's called Alcoholics Anonymous. And why don't we just, since you're agreeing and you're stating that you're an alcoholic, why don't we just go through that? And then we'll look at the drug addiction. And what I found, at least however it is that I relate with the new person, that's effective sometimes, because I'm not arguing the drug addiction part. I'm totally agreeing with them, and then just let's set that aside and just look at this. But but not always. Many times it's the person looks for somebody else to work with because they need them for whatever reason in their minds. They need them both. And I wasn't brought through I was brought through the book with alcoholism, and that's what worked for me, and that's what I actually have to pass on. And I'm talking myself a lot about individual stuff, not group stuff. And the tradition, like you already mentioned, Mike, that it's a group thing. And so I think groups that I'm a part of, it can be important to visit more than just in May every year for the fifth tradition. Is, do we all have a common? Do we have a common goal? Do we have a common solution? Um, what is our common purpose? And if there's division in the group, there's an opportunity for the group to maybe get some outside help through group inventories or whatever to see. It could be like you said, of vital importance for a group to have a common purpose, and with a common purpose can come a common message. And when I hear the message that in Alcoholics Anonymous through the steps, we can not drink again and we can get well. Our psyche can be changed. And I think that's great news. And I think it's very attractive news to people that haven't found a solution yet. And you mentioned, Sally, about maybe somebody with 2 days, maybe somebody with 10 days, maybe somebody with 20 years. I've gone through the steps many times with people with a lot of years. And as always happens, of course, I get so much out of it. But it's also really something to see the lights go on when people that have had rigid ideas and active in AA and dying from resentments get exposed to the steps as they're written in the book, because there are still so many groups that have a primary purpose and they know what it is. And it's been really helpful to me just to be involved in groups like this, because going back, everybody else talked about the shoemaker, the system that's been written down in the book, it ain't broke. Maybe it doesn't need fixing. At any rate, I talked it. Lara.
I like that, Stephen.
Good job, Steve.
Yeah, my name's Lara and I'm an alcoholic.
Yes, you are.
Lara.
All right. Well, I like the literature and I'm learning more and more about it all the time. In the front of the pamphlet, the AA group, where it all begins, page 7, it talks about AA's single purpose. And it quotes Tradition 5. Then it says, there are those who predict that AA may well become a new spearhead for a spiritual awakening throughout the world. I think this might come from Language of the Heart. When our friends say these things, they are both generous and sincere, but we of AA must reflect that such a tribute and such a prophecy could well prove to be a heady drink for most of us. That is, if we really came to believe that to be the real purpose of AA, and if we commence to behave accordingly. Our society, therefore, will prudently cleave to its single purpose, the carrying of the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. Let us resist the proud assumption that since God has enabled us to do well in one area, we are destined to be a channel of saving grace for everybody. And that was from Bill W., 1955. There's also this little pamphlet called Problems Other Than Alcohol, F8. F means it's free, and you can find it, GSO will gladly give it to you for free. But it has a lot of interesting information in here. And so it says that the following excerpts came from Grapevine articles from 69, 70, and 72, respectively, from Yeah, okay. It says the problem of drug addiction in its several forms lies close to us all. It stirs our deepest interest and sympathy. Many AAs, especially those who have suffered these particular addictions, are now asking, what can we do about drugs within our fellowship and without? Specifically, here's a list of questions we are often asked. Can a non-alcoholic pill or drug addict become an AA member? No. Can such a person be brought as a visitor to an open AA meeting for help and inspiration? Yes. If so, should these non-alcoholic pill or drug users be led to believe they have become AA members? No. Can a pill or drug taker who also has a genuine alcoholic history become a member of AA? Yes. Now, there are certain things that AA cannot do for anybody, regardless of what our desires or sympathies may be. Our first duty as a fellowship is to ensure our own survival. Therefore, we have to avoid distractions and multi-purpose activity. Sobriety, freedom from alcohol through the teaching and practice of the 12 steps is the sole purpose of an AA group. Groups have repeatedly tried other activities and they have always failed. It has always been learned that there is no possible way to make non-alcoholics into AA members. We have to confine our membership to alcoholics and we have to confine our AA groups to a single purpose. If we don't stick to these principles, we shall almost surely collapse. If we collapse, we cannot help anyone. I see no way of making non-alcoholic addicts into AA members. Experience says loudly that we can admit no exceptions, even though drug users and alcoholics happen to be first cousins of a sort. If we persist in trying this, I'm afraid it will be hard on the drug user himself as well as on AA. We must accept the fact that no non-alcoholic, whatever his affliction, can be converted into an alcoholic and therefore an AA member. We cannot give AA membership to non-alcoholic addicts, but like anyone else, they should be able to attend open AA meetings, provided, of course, that the group themselves are willing. And then in some other literature somewhere is that non-alcoholics can attend open AA meetings as observers only. And the thinking is that if a non-alcoholic shares in an AA meeting, that it ceases to be an AA meeting. And I railed against that opinion and that experience and that suggestion for a long time. I'm also a drug addict. However, I do not attend meetings for addicts. I get everything I need out of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic, and I'm so grateful that I am. And I'm the more, the longer I stay sober and the more I learn about Alcoholics Anonymous and the history of Alcoholics Anonymous and the traditions and my responsibility as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous to protect our fellowship for the future, for the alcoholic that's not yet born, that we need to protect our fellowship by adhering to these traditions. So I'm just super grateful to be in a group like this and studying traditions and have people around me that have gone before me that have passed on their passion for Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm just grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Lara.
Thank you.
Can I quote a paragraph on my?
Please, Mike.
There is another reason for this signalness of purpose. It is the great paradox of AA that we know we can seldom keep the precious gift of sobriety unless we give it away.
Thank you for that. It seems like there's a challenge in AA now more so than there ever has been before in talking about the singleness of purpose is how do we present our message of recovery that doesn't feel where another person, like a drug addict, is excluded, even though in a way they are. But I'm talking in a, can we present it in a, to an alcoholic drug addict? Um, Maybe there's a way that's better than the way things have been most of the time, where a person isn't feeling attacked. You know, you can't do this, you can't say that, along the lines of here's what we do versus here's what you can't do.
You said do.
I've always had a filthy mouth. I was in the Marine Corps. Anyway, I try and think of that myself when it's coming up. Is there a way to present effect? I'm big on the word effective. Is it effective, or does it make a person feel excluded? Because probably more and more new people coming into AA are going to be dually addicted. It seems that way.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the point of saying you're a drug addict in an AA meeting, though? Other than just some kind of ego thing.
Well, and I'd say people hear it, so that sounds cool, and I'm better than an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. So AA can't help me, neither can NA.
I heard a story once that, you know, that this guy was alcoholic addict, and his sponsor talked to him after the meeting and says, "What was that?" He's like, "What? If you are not clear what is killing you, then, you know, we have to have a conversation."
And do you think that can start at the group level if the group's clear on its primary purpose?
Yeah, I actually think it gets down to effective sponsorship. I think your sponsor needs to be the one to inform you of what the tradition 5 is and why it's important to not be a drug addict in an AA meeting. It's just it's an education, it's an opportunity for education. Of course, you can't control them. They can do what they want. I mean, of course,
You can't
yeah.
control your sponsees.
Well, I mean, I can inform and educate, right? And you know, so, and that's my duty, to inform and educate. Yeah.
I have a sponsee that has like 60 days. And so one of the first things that I do before I even open the big book is go through the traditions, because they may or may not keep me as their sponsor, but at least they'll know how to conduct themselves in a meeting. So I just briefly go over 1 through 12 of the traditions before we do anything else. Anyway, this gal,
What a good idea.
this gal said to me, alcoholic addict is what we learned in treatment. You know, keep coming back. It works if you work it. That's not AA. That is treatment center stuff. You know, what's the point when they go, you know, what they read all that. I don't do any of that stuff, so I can't even remember all of it. But there's so much chanting that has nothing to do with AA. And that's another thing. When I'm going through the 12 traditions, I also tell them we don't chant. Amen is the end of the prayer. You know, we don't say what's the point. You know, we don't say, you know, are these extravagant promises? And everybody yells out, you know, yes or no, or whatever it is
We
they're
think
yelling.
not.
We think not. Yeah. So no, we don't do that in AA, because that is not Alcoholics Anonymous. That is treatment center stuff. And it's filtering in, like you were saying, it's way more than it used to be. So there's a meeting that I had to quit going to because I can't change the world, but you know, they go, is there any announcements for the good of AA, NA, and CA at this meeting? And it's in the book as an AA meeting. And I mean, I was making myself crazy because I want to just stand on the table and say, what the heck are you guys doing?
You're so polite.
It was being recorded.
What did you do?
Yeah, what do you do? Anyway, that's just, you know, again, love me or you hate me.
I think we have microphone.
I was just gonna say, that was like back in tradition 4, was it not, where each group is autonomous except in matters affecting other groups as a whole? You know, and another thing that I kind of brought up or wanted to bring up too, I'm fortunate enough to bring in a meeting at Salvation Army on Thursdays at 2:30 in the afternoon. I very seldom get more than 1 or 2 people, but at least I get a couple. And most of them that do come up to the meeting are addicts, and I do an AA meeting. And what they think is, well, an addiction is an addiction. And I don't bring up anything other than, well, we're going to do it. I try to do it as an AA meeting, but if I don't have anybody in there that's AA, I'll still do a meeting because at least they hear what the 12 steps are all about. Since the only step that talks about alcoholism is step 1. And I just want them to realize that there is a way to stop doing whatever they're doing if they do the steps in accordance with their particular addiction. So, and since it's not a group meeting, we can talk about whatever they want to talk about. I just try to bring in the message of AA for the Salvation Army, not for anything else. It's a group. It's a meeting, not a group meeting. So it's not part, I don't ask for money when I'm there. I just do it because Salvation Army found out that I was in AA and they asked me if I would be willing to do a meeting for them. And I said, you darn right, I'll do it. Because if anybody comes up there, it's a good thing. But in our AA meeting hall, when we actually have a meeting there, yeah, we try to talk about alcoholism. If somebody gets off track and they start talking about opioids or something, anything, whatever it is, the chairperson sometimes chimes in and says, hey, I forget how he words it, but we're going to talk about, or can you talk about your alcoholism? So we try to be polite, but again, that's just every group is a little bit different how they do that. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I got. Thanks.
Well, thank you for that. And again, Bernice and Lara and Sally, Mikey, appreciate the participation tonight.
Steve.
And look forward to seeing everybody next month, which the date would be my phone. Okay. For Tuesday.
25th.
June
25th.
June 25th.
You were right, Mike.
Cool.
And so again, thanks to everybody. And Mike, maybe you can lead us out in the responsibility prayer.
I sure can. Who's responsible?
I am responsible. When anyone, anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA always to be there. And for that, I am responsible.
Yay.
Job, everybody. Go Mariners.
Thank you. Have a good night, guys. Thank you.
Thanks
Have
again,
a good
Mike.
night, everyone. Thank you so
Bernice.
much for another wonderful